Last time I was here in this theater was 2 years ago. There was a town hall that the state senator Brad Hoylman convened about out-of-sight commercial rents in New York City, so this is a lot more pleasant. By the way, Patricia and I 4 years ago went to Washington, D.C., and we saw the Mariinsky Ballet of St. Petersburg, Russia, and we went backstage and looked at the costumes, so it's been fun to be involved in the birth throes of the exhibit. And it's even better than I thought it would be. So I'm talking specifically about the Dryads of West 55th Street in Manhattan. That's the name of my essay in the exhibition catalog. And I call them Dryads because you could see the ballerinas in a direct matrilineal lineage from ancient mythology to the cultural pantheon of post-World War II New York City. And even a review of Tanaquil Leclerc, who is in this photo, in Jerome Robbins' ballet Afternoon of a Faun, described her in that ballet as a dryad of Fifth Avenue. So she crossed the epochs there. West 55th Street was the location and is of New York City Center, which was the home base of New York City Ballet in the 1950s. Which was a decade when fashion borrowed so heavily from ballet, when the fashion press, gave ballet a considerable amount of play, and there was lots of overlap and crossover between ballet and between fashion. And in those different times for women and for ballet, much different than today, the dancers themselves accepted as part of their professional obligation the imperative that they look as polished off stage as on, as Rosemary was saying about Margot Fonteyn. So the New York City Ballet star ballerinas, each of whom was very distinctive and different, devised what I call sartorial strategies designed to perpetuate theatrical illusion. Creatively, they costume themselves as exponents of a chic and allure distinctive but coextensive with their onstage balletic identities. Ballet's expanding popularity and visibility during these years was enhanced by fashion's infatuation with balletic design, and those two forces converged for me in the person of Tanaquil Leclerc, who is the focus of my essay. Oh, sorry. Oh, no, okay. Then I'm going to be looking down all the time. Ballet, Leclerc exemplified the things about ballet that were influencing popular entertainment and fashion. She epitomized the sleekness, elegance, elongation that ballet has always projected, and she epitomized an exaggeration of those things, which Balanchine prized in her. It was she who most emblematically traversed the worlds of fashion and ballet. She also staked out her own identity as a photographer, keeping a darkroom backstage. And by the way, Leclerc took the picture of the cat being pushed or jumping in that photo. I think after, as you know, Leclerc was stricken with polio and paralyzed, which is another horrifying story, which I don't want to intrude here, but she and Balanchine trained their cat to actually dance or do something approaching dance. And she did a children's book about the cat and took the photos. Okay, it was, quote, "It was perhaps Tanaquil Leclerc who made plain a kinship between Balanchine's image of women and that of contemporary fashion designers," end quote. Deborah Jowett writes in the book Time and the Dancing Image. The kinship played out in the pages of the fashion glossies, where she was frequently seen modeling clothes as well as chronicled in dance portraiture. Sometimes she was identified in photo spreads. Other times she functioned purely as would a professional, unnamed fashion model. This photo here shows her photographed by Genevieve Naylor in 1952 for a profile of her in Cosmopolitan magazine. She is seen ostensibly trying on pointe shoes at Capezio's in Manhattan, wearing a mohair coat that she actually owned, but she also seems to be modeling it. I will show you also a little bit later. Oh, I'm sorry, let me maybe move this. Okay. Here she is in 1953 in Vogue. I'm blanking out on the name of the photographer. This is March 1, 1953 issue. And by then she is identified as Mrs. George Balanchine, as indeed she had become on New Year's Eve of 1952, following Maria Tolchi in the succession of Balanchine wives. Now, New York City Ballet's repertoire let the dancers inhabit a cosmos of their own that ranged across time and space. Reverberations of the past informed new incarnations of enduring archetypes. In Afternoon of a Faun, as I've already mentioned, Irene Sharaff designed for Leclerc, I don't have a photo of it, a tunic that suggested a contemporary woman's one-piece bathing suit, a dancer's practice outfit, but also retained an allusion to the tunics of archaic Greece. Epics conflated and converged. A millennia of mythical allure was distilled. In Balanchine's La Valse, Barbara Korinska designed for Leclerc and all the women in the ensemble long, voluminous, bell-shaped ball gowns. I don't have a photo of that either, I'm sorry, but there is one in the exhibition catalog, with multi-layered tulle skirts. The ensembles were multiple plummy colors misted with pale overlay. Leclerc's was pale, and then she, in this macabre ballet, danced with Death, and who gave her a black chiffon overcoat. So the ballet La Valse, which premiered in 1951, existed in an ambiguous time warp, simultaneously suggesting Dior's new look and historical precedents, as well as romantic ballet costumes of the mid-19th century. La Valse could be called a kinetic transposition of Gothic horror and feverish romanticism, but it also contained a cautionary lesson for contemporary humanity, 6 years after the Axis surrender in World War II. But the most canonical ballet costume was, and is still today, the tutu. Tutus can, and Laura actually showed you a picture I'm going to put up, but it's certainly worth looking at twice. That is Leclerc and Balanchine's The Nutcracker, leading the Waltz of the Flowers. Tutus can seem fixed, timeless, immutable, simultaneously immovable object and irresistible force. Every time we see a tunic, we're seeing an echo of Baroque panniers worn at the time of the Baroque era, offstage and on stage. But of course, the design of the tutu was always in flux as well. In the Nutcracker, Leclerc wore here, as you see here, a very abbreviated tutu that was considered absolutely almost, not shocking, but startlingly abbreviated at that time. In fact, after Leclerc was sidelined with polio, the costume was altered. And the later ballerina Karen von Arlendingen told a friend of hers, the fashion model Peggy Moffat, that no one looked as good in the costume as Leclerc, and so they decided they didn't want to wear it, and they would just move on to something else there. As you see, I'm trying to think what exactly was it that intimidated the success of ballerinas. I think it's the length of Leclerc and the length at the top of her thigh. Her legs, especially as thin as she is there, are angular. She had beautiful legs, interesting looking legs, not the most curvaceous in that very essentialized state that she was in and that frankly Balanchine wanted her to be in. But this tutu, which created a sensation, Allegra Kent, the New York City Ballet ballerina, said to me recently and to Patricia that was the most beautiful costume in the entire production of the Nutcracker. It was lilac and pink, by the way, appropriately floral colors. So it certainly reminded audiences that ballet costuming was constantly in dialogue with contemporary women's clothes. Barbara Korinska's biographer, Tony Bentley, writes that the tutu reflected Korinska's interest in women's corsets, as well as some recent designs she'd done for Gypsy Rose Lee. There's vertical bone seaming in the bodice. There's that very minimal skirt There's a sort of almost Elizabethan, the tutu has become almost an Elizabethan ruff. As Maria Tolchief said to me, she had to follow Leclerc in the Nutcracker. Leclerc was Waltz with the Flowers. Tolchief was the grand pas de deux, and Tolchief said after the sensational success of Leclerc in this, it was very hard to go on stage following that, but she did to great success of her own. I have another tutu photo here. You're getting to see everything in advance. Okay, that is Leclerc as a teenage star of Ballet Society, which was the precursor to New York City Ballet. And there, to me, the photo is by Irving Penn. She looks sort of punkish. I don't know. It's a tutu is a tutu. So again, it's short. The turned-in legs, the lowered head, all that seems to me like it could be a Betsy Johnson or Madonna kind of pastiche in the 80s, and that's in 47. Maybe it's just the attitude that she's projecting, but again, it undercuts some of the traditional connotations of the tutu. It takes the tutu, this photo at least, out of its comfort zone, and it recontextualizes the tutu. I understand why Patricia said to me, I really want that picture in. Okay. And I didn't even understand what she was seeing in it particularly, but it's taken me a while, but I do now. Okay, here is another ballet by Jerome Robbins. Okay, wait, other way. No, that's a great picture, but not yet. Okay, sorry. This is, okay. This is Jerome Robbins' ballet, The Pied Piper, performed by New York City Ballet in Portugal in 1953 on one of their long, long tours that they took to Europe. Here again, as in Afternoon of a Faun, Leclerc and the entire ensemble are theatrical projections of themselves. They are purported to be performers, hypnotized by an onstage clarinetist playing Copland's Clarinet Concerto. In the pursuit of verisimilitude, the dancers were encouraged to, actually mandated to wear their own practice clothes on stage. We even got paid for providing our own costumes, Leclerc recalled in 1974. They looked rather raffish. They are compared to Toulouse-Lautrec in reviews. Again, it seems rather beatnikish and improvised and contemporary, bringing the contemporary zeitgeist onto the ballet stage. This is the only performance photo in my article, so I love that because it's action. It reminds us what clothes and costumes have in common. They are contingent on the human body in motion as well as at rest, and ballet takes these two spectrum points and works out infinite gradations between them. Visiting Europe during the 1950s helped New York City Ballet position itself amid an international cultural pantheon. On tour, the dancers were frequently invited to important social and diplomatic functions, another reason why they made such an effort to look their best. Quote, "We were representing America," end quote, New York City Ballet's Barbara Walczak recalled. The fashion industry was happy to lend a hand. Various Seventh Avenue firms provided a special outfit for each woman in the company prior to the company's first European tour in 1952, and there was a nice PR payoff before the week that they left for Europe for their 5-month tour. Look magazine photographed the dancers in their new clothes, providing extra, as I said, an extra spritz of publicity. Oh, I love that, but not yet. Okay, here is New York City Ballet's Melissa Hayden, Maria Tolchief, and Leclerc were being photographed together in 1955 at a cocktail party in Paris. New York City Ballet was in town to participate in a Salute à France festival, performing repertory set to French music. For me, the where of the photo is part of its emblematic message. Ballerinas of the New World, bringing themselves and their recently formed troupe to the city that had cradled the art form centuries earlier. If you look very closely, you can see they're holding up little medallions that they've received to commemorate their participation in this festival. Obviously, they've been asked to show them for the camera. Each ballerina is dressed as so-called herself, each wearing different iterations of cocktail party attire. And you can see they are each very distinctive personalities and each dressed quite differently for the same event. Here we have a party in 1956 at the American Embassy in Paris. Balanchine is at the lower right and looks very much the Pasha and the Pygmalion. You see there's some good-looking men who are way up at the top of the staircase, and much more to the foreground, there's Leclerc in that pale dress. There's Patricia Wilde, and this was the type of reception that the company received across Europe. Wherever they went, the United States government and the European government saluted them. We reach as a cumulative question in my mind is the ambivalent issue of display. Hayden, Tolchief, and Leclerc are facing outward. They're off stage, but certainly they're still performing. They are projecting what you could call in academic terminology a liminal state between full theatricality, public persona, and personal reality. Certainly for them, the curtain was almost always up. That is no longer the case today. Ballet dancers do not make any comparable effort to dress up, except maybe, at a party, yes, but they come out of the stage show looking like anything, rather bedraggled. So I'm happy for them because obviously they may very well be healthier and more psychically integrated personalities than these women were. I don't know, but I can't quantify that. But certainly the art form has suffered somewhat in terms of reclame because the dancers do not make an effort to project the mystery and the enchantment of the art form off stage, as these women so assiduously did. Now, my final photo, which I've been previewing, now you get to see it. This is Leclerc, soon after she was married to Balanchine, outside their very modest prefab country house in Weston, Connecticut. When I see this picture, I want to say the theatrical masks have fallen away, and what's revealed is another mask of hers. Because obviously there is some disenchantment, wariness, defensiveness on her face, and of course that could have been the passing moment, but I think it's more than that. A friend of mine even said to me, it's almost like a Joan Didion photo. Fascinating to me, I found it in her apartment in the Apthorpe building on Upper Broadway in 2001. She had just died. She died on her wedding, the anniversary of her wedding to Balanchine, December 31, 2000. She'd been married December 31, 52. New York City Ballet asked me to inventory her boxes and boxes of photos that I think her mother, who was very much involved always with her life, had collected, and then when her mother died, they passed to Leclerc. And of course, Balanchine had taken it, so it was absolutely fascinating to me, and it still is. To me, it fuses Leclerc's identities as ballerina, photographer, model, wife, and muse. All of them are referenced here. She sits against outside of their house. We are literally seeing her through Balanchine's eyes. We're, in a way, watching them collaborate off stage. Certainly, ballet is the most collaborative of art forms. In the rehearsal studio, Balanchine's dancers, Tolchief, Leclerc, the people he worked with very closely, learned to enlarge, amplify, to finish his choreographic sentences. And that creative process with him was always, I'm almost done, was always thrilling, and no matter how many vicissitudes they endured, those working sessions with him are highlights. So in this, and also Leclerc's portraits of him, of Balanchine, were frequently published. So here the roles of subject and object are reversed, even as husband and wife maintain the objectification of choreographer toward ballerina. As you can see, she's wearing a print sundress and is as immaculately groomed as any fashion model, movie star, or ballerina. Yet, paradoxically, at the same time, her freckles show through. Balanchine's medium close-up expands in the mind's eye to a panoramic vista, Leclerc in context with her highly distinctive ballerina colleagues. They brought the finest in American culture as well as style to the world's attention. Balanchine was most definitely boss, but they were the instruments, interpreters, collaborators that made his work possible. Their style on stage and off identified them both as serious artists and creatures of allure and enchantment. They were independent personalities and personas. They were mutually dependent collaborators with their choreographers, not only Balanchine, with their artistic director, who was only Balanchine, and with their storied, timeless, and topical art form. Thank you.